Hello, and welcome to Nightmare Masterclass. My name is David Stockdale. I'll be your host on this excursion into the dark unknown. Normally, I cover dark and enigmatic works of all sorts in the realm of horror. But I doubt it would surprise you to know that I'm a big fan of an animated series on Adult Swim called Rick and Morty. Created by Dan Harmon and Justin Roiland, this cartoon series is unique both in its dark, absurdist brand of humor, as well as its stark dedication to the detailed continuity of this bizarre fictional universe. The show revolves around Morty, a high school kid, and his grandfather Rick, a misanthropic, mad genius scientist. The two go on adventures throughout space, often spurring existential crises for the characters involved. This installment will focus specifically on the Season 3 premiere of Rick and Morty, titled The Rick Shank Redemption. Much to the dismay of fans, this episode aired on April Fool's Day after a long period of uncertainty and anticipation. We'll still have to wait until the summer for the rest of the season, but rest assured, this premiere episode is eventful and ripe for the picking as far as a thorough analysis is concerned. At this point, I'm obliged to say that if you haven't seen the show, stop watching this immediately and come back to the video when you've seen it. And certainly do not watch this unless you've seen the Season 3 premiere. There's a lot to go over, so let's get into it. Just a bit of context here. In the Season 2 finale, The Wedding Squanchers, Rick turned himself over to the Galactic Federation. At the end of the episode, he submitted himself to imprisonment in a maximum security facility. Unbeknownst to his family, Rick turned himself in, presumably so that his family could return to Earth and not have to live out the rest of their days as galactic felons. The Federation subsequently colonized the Earth as a result of having found Rick's planet of origin. The Season 3 premiere picks up in a simulation in which Rick is interrogated by a Federation agent. The Federation attempts to get Rick to reveal his formula for interdimensional travel. However, Rick manifests a fabricated memory in order to deceive the agent, who unwittingly transmits a virus to the Federation prison. This virus allows Rick to access a piece of technology that gives him the ability to transfer his consciousness into the bodies of others. He subsequently transfers himself into the Federation agent's body and exits the simulation. Meanwhile, back on Earth, Summer plans to rescue her grandfather Rick. Despite Morty's discouragement, she digs up the alternate Rick's body in the backyard and obtains his portal gun. Morty takes her to C-137 Earth to show her just how little Rick is concerned with the consequences of his actions. The two are then taken by the Council of Ricks. After the other Ricks learn of C-137 Rick's imprisonment, they send an elite squad of Ricks, known as SEAL Team Rick, to assassinate him before he reveals any secrets to the Federation. They attack, and Rick transfers into one of the SEAL Team unit's bodies. He proceeds to infiltrate the Citadel. He transports the entire thing into the Federation prison. Needless to say, this creates all kinds of chaos and confusion, and it is gradually revealed that this was Rick's plan all along. One pesky Rick takes Summer hostage. Rick feigns disinterest, stating that he could easily go to another universe and find new grandkids. Morty, infuriated at his grandfather's indifference, as well as his incessant taunting, shoots Rick in the head. Fortunately, the gun is fake. Pesky Rick lowers his guard as C-137 Rick feigns death. C-137 Rick takes a shot and kills Pesky Rick, thus saving his grandkids. Rick proceeds to tank the Federation economy by changing the value of their universal currency from 1 to 0. Consequently, the president of the Federation commits suicide. It's safe to say that Rick has thrown the Galactic Federation into complete disarray. As a result, the Federation colony back on Earth is put to an end. Again, this was Rick's plan all along. Rick, Summer, and Morty return home. This prompts an infuriated Jerry to give Beth an ultimatum. She can either pick her husband Jerry or her father Rick. Beth later tells Rick that she and Jerry are getting a divorce. Her choice is clear. Morty is upset by the news of his parents' divorce. Rick goes on a maniacal diatribe about his upending of the familial order, as well as his apparent victory over the Galactic Federation. So, by the end of the episode, it looks like Rick's pretty much come out on top. Jerry's out of the picture. Both the Council of Ricks and the Galactic Federation are in total disarray. Yes, it looks like Rick has proven victorious over his various enemies. But there's one little problem with this. We have no assurance that any of the events in this episode have actually occurred. By the end of the episode, Rick could still be in a simulation. The seeds of this postulation are aptly laid out in Rick's discussion with the Federation agent.
It was a virus giving me full control over the brainalyzer.
What are you talking about? This is a memory. You can't alter details of a memory.
True, but you can alter anything you want about a totally fabricated origin story.
After it's revealed that Rick fabricated his backstory in order to plant a virus in the Federation systems, the agent, rather astonished at Rick's manipulation, states that one cannot alter a memory in the simulation. Rick concedes that this is true, but explains that absolutely none of what we've seen is actually rooted in his memories. It's all a fabrication. Do you see the problem here? The fact that Rick can manifest events in this simulation presents an existential quandary. What if the entire thing is a manifestation of Rick's mind?
It's just like that movie that you keep crowing about. You talking about Inception? That's right, Morty. This is gonna be a lot like that, except, it's gonna make sense. Inception made sense? You don't have to try to impress me, Morty. Listen.
The writers of Rick and Morty have previously explored the idea of the multiverse, i.e., the concept that there are an infinite number of parallel universes outside our own. Perhaps this season is exploring another existential concept.
Well, I mean, there's some interesting things here on the virtual reality front. Just on the whole notion of a simulation, which is that if you extrapolate into the future and say, well, how good, let's say, will video games be in 100 or 200 or 1,000 years from now? If there's continued improvement and you're in a full body haptic suit with a sort of surround vision, and it becomes, beyond a certain resolution, indistinguishable from reality. And there are likely to be millions, maybe billions of such simulations. So then, what are the odds that we're actually in base reality? Isn't it 1 in billions?
Proponents of the simulated reality theory generally argue along the lines of probabilities. Philosopher Nick Bostrom postulates 3 possibilities, one of which, he argues, must be true. The first is that humans and all human-level societies in the universe go extinct before reaching the stage where they create advanced simulations. The second is that humans and all human-level civilizations do advance to this point, but rather lose interest before creating such simulations. Now, if these 2 possibilities are not true, then there is only one other option. The possibility that we are already living in a simulation is very high, a near certainty in practical terms. Unfortunately, we have absolutely no way of knowing whether or not reality itself is a simulation, but that's a discussion for another time. Let's think of this concept in relation to Rick and Morty. The episode starts with Rick having a meal at Shoney's with Jerry, Beth, Summer, and Morty. It's almost immediately revealed that this is a simulation. Rick comments on the transparency of this simulation. He's not impressed. Rick speculates that they have him in what he refers to as a Series 9000 simulation. Rick wonders aloud why the Federation doesn't have him in their best equipment. This is straight out of Rick's mouth. He acknowledges that the Federation has more advanced simulation software. If this is true, why isn't the Federation using their best technology on Rick, the most intelligent person in the universe? Well, what if the simulation Rick's in is more convincing than he realizes? What if Rick is in the Federation's most sophisticated simulation software? What if he's still in the simulation at the end of this episode? I'm not entirely sure that this theory is correct, but I do believe that a number of details in the episode support it. Just think about it for a second. Nearly every single event that occurs in the episode happens in Rick's favor. That's a little weird, right? Usually things go at least somewhat awry. It's true that Jerry has been a pest for Rick ever since Rick moved into the house. It makes total sense that Rick would want Jerry and Beth to get a divorce. In the past, he's even suggested that they should either go to a counselor or get a divorce. Well, in Season 2, Episode 7, Big Trouble in Little Sanchez, Beth and Jerry tried counseling, and yes, there was a bit of turmoil, though ultimately their relationship was apparently strong enough to make it through that whole ordeal. So why the divorce now? Is Beth and Jerry's relationship really not strong enough to address Beth's unhealthy, enabling relationship with her father, or Jerry's persistent feelings of inadequacy? Look, I'm entirely of the opinion that the show could take the divorce route with Beth and Jerry, but not in the way things played out in the Season 3 premiere. It just seemed off. Isn't it strange that Beth is so cavalier about the divorce? It's like she's just flipped a switch and totally forgot all the stuff that she's been through with Jerry. And why isn't Summer reacting? Why even include Summer in this scene, considering she's just looking at her phone? The only person that seems affected by the news of Beth and Jerry's divorce is Morty. Now, we could chalk this up to the fact that Beth and Jerry's relationship hasn't exactly been perfect, and everyone's aware of that. One might even say that their divorce has been a long time coming. Summer's probably not surprised by it, Rick's probably not surprised by it either, but there's something fishy going on here. This doesn't seem to be playing out in an organic way. For Rick, having Jerry out of the way makes things simpler for him. So I understand that getting rid of Jerry could have been part of Rick's plan all along. After all, in the Season 2 finale, The Wedding Squanchers, Jerry suggests to the family that they should just turn Rick into the Federation. Now, little did Jerry know, Rick was listening in on that conversation. And I don't think a person like Rick forgets something like that. Towards the end of the episode, Rick makes it known to Morty that ousting Jerry was part of his plan all along. But how exactly did he know that Jerry would give Beth an ultimatum when he returned? It doesn't quite add up. Now, you could write this off and say that Rick is the most intelligent being in the universe, and that's how he anticipated Jerry's ultimatum. The problem with this is that, yes, Rick is highly intelligent, but he cannot in reality be an impervious demigod. If this is actually the route the writers are taking in the overall story, there are absolutely no stakes involved in future episodes. Rick will always just end up outwitting anyone that crosses him. Rick can't just be the deus ex machina that swoops in and makes everything perfect for himself all the time. Unless, that is, the entire episode is a simulation designed to make Rick think that he has that kind of ultimate control. Consider the events from the perspective that the entire episode takes place inside a simulation. If this theory holds true, and Rick is in fact in the simulation throughout the whole episode, it stands to reason that all of the other characters are also part of the simulation, just like the main characters at Shoney's towards the beginning of the episode. If we consider that all of the events in the episode are actually aspects of a simulation based on Rick's subconscious, it is reasonable to assume that each of the respective characters' perspectives on Rick are actually things that Rick thinks about himself. Consider the C-137 universe in which the family holds a grudge against Rick for Cronenberging their whole world.
So, looking for this?
What are you doing with that?
It stinks of Rick.
If we think of this scene as an aspect of Rick's simulation, we can discern that these sentiments are actually manifestations of Rick's own guilt for ruining their lives. I think that Morty is the aspect of Rick's subconscious that realizes he's still in a simulation. On the surface, Morty seems upset that his parents are getting a divorce, and that's entirely plausible. He's had anxiety about this prospect in previous episodes. But again, there's something off about this scene. If we view the episode from the perspective that Morty is a particular aspect of Rick's subconscious, his dialogue in the episode has some interesting psychological implications about the man himself. Earlier in the episode, Morty suggests that Rick doesn't even like himself. He tells Summer that Rick shouldn't be thought of as her hero, but rather as a demon or some kind of fucked up god. That's a telling comment. I think that this is how some part of Rick views himself. Perhaps in this simulation, Morty is an aspect of Rick's subconscious that despises himself. Conversely, Summer could be another aspect of Rick's subconscious. A part of himself who still has faith that deep down, he's a good person. When Rick starts going off on a prideful and unhinged tangent about his upending of the family order, Morty expresses concern that their adventures are going to get dark. Perhaps that's Rick telling himself that none of this is real. These experiences are all just comprised of the dark places in Rick's mind, the places his head inevitably goes when left to its own devices. Rick's rant at the end of the episode is certainly a nod to the end of the pilot episode, in which Rick goes on a similar rant. But how do we make sense of it in the context of this simulation theory? Well, the Federation agent notes earlier in the episode that due to the effects of a device called the Brainalyzer, Rick's mind is deteriorating each and every moment Rick spends in the simulation. If Rick is still in the simulation at the end of the episode, Rick's unhinged rant could be a result of him beginning to lose his mind. What if Rick never escaped the simulation? What if his own personal hell is a simulation in which he has a godlike ability to manipulate his environment? Now, you might be asking, why would this be a form of punishment for Rick? Why would this be his hell? Well, that's because deep down he knows it isn't real. He knows it's a fabrication of his mind, just like the origin story he fabricated. Maybe the Federation is just banking on the likelihood that Rick will give up the formula given enough time in this torturous simulation. Another indication that this episode might be a little different is the fact that the full intro does not play. After the cold open, the show cuts straight to the title. This is the only episode in the series thus far in which this is the case. Perhaps they skipped the theme song for timing reasons, but nonetheless, it's a notable distinction. Let's also consider the fact that the episode aired on April Fool's Day. A lot of people considered this move to be something of a double troll. After all, a number of people saw the announcement and didn't believe the episode was really out. Good trick, right? But what if it's actually like a triple troll? That is to say, what if all of the events in the episode haven't really occurred?
It's like Inception, Morty, so if it's confusing and stupid, then so is everyone's favorite movie. Oh man, I really like this life.
Let's talk about another glaring incongruity. The Rick we're acquainted with is often presented as somehow different from the Ricks of other dimensions. But how exactly is he different? Rick has previously referred to himself as the Rickest Rick of them all. What does this mean? Note that during the climax of the episode, when the Council of Ricks are transported to the Federation prison, we can observe another Rick using his Morty as a human shield. Now, while our Rick certainly has put Morty in harm's way on countless occasions, I doubt he'd ever use his grandson as a shield. And I greatly doubt that Rick was using Summer and Morty this entire time in some kind of Machiavellian plot to get Beth and Jerry divorced. I think this is a misdirection. I believe the simulation is lulling Rick into the belief that he's impervious in order for him to let his guard down and reveal the formula for interdimensional travel. Throughout the series, Rick presents himself as an apathetic, aloof genius. But there's evidence to indicate that he's not actually like this. I believe that Rick is not really the egomaniac we observe at the end of this episode. Rick did shed a tear in a previous episode when he thought Morty had been killed, and in another earlier episode, Bird Person noted that Rick's catchphrase, wubba lubba dub dub, actually means, I am in great pain. Now, consider Rick's fabricated backstory, the one that he had presented to the Federation agent in order to plant his virus. How could Rick manifest such a convincing backstory? Is the story really a total fabrication? What if the particular details of the backstory were indeed fabricated, but the basic gist of it were true? After all, why is Rick constantly spouting a catchphrase that essentially amounts to an expression of his own immense pain? Note that the first representation we see of Rick's backstory is stored between his memory of where he was on 9/11 and his favorite sports blooper. Rick's first representation is a woman and a girl, presumably Rick's late wife and Beth, standing in front of an interdimensional portal. Why is this the first representation we see? Rick is subconsciously linking his family to the concept of interdimensional travel. In his mind, the two are connected. Why is this? Well, as Rick notes,
The day I invented the portal gun is the day I lost her.
he says this shortly after the representation disintegrates in a flash. I think some version of this story is true. In some significant manner, Rick did lose his wife. This is what makes Rick a tragic anti-hero in the series. But it's perhaps more relevant to this discussion to point out that if some version of this backstory is true, Rick is not exactly the god everyone makes him out to be in this episode. If we assume that some version of the fabricated origin story is true, then it stands to reason that Rick could not save his wife. I think some granule of truth exists here, and I think this simulation software is more enigmatic than is readily apparent. So, how is the third season going to play out? I have no idea. One of the great things about Rick and Morty is its unpredictability. This simulated reality theory is one of many ways the show could play out. It could be that Rick is still in a simulation, and the entirety of this next season will occur in the dark trenches of Rick's mind. If that's the case, how will he really break out? And what if I'm wrong? We'll have to wait and see how Season 3 pans out. But I hope I've given you a new perspective to consider in the meantime. That wraps it up for this installment of Nightmare Masterclass. In the next installment, I address a rather glaring omission in this episode, i.e., the Szechuan sauce. That's right, I'm going to talk about it. Thank you for watching, and good night.